What if I revealed to you that true alchemy was never intended to turn lead into gold? That there are mysteries so remote, so immense, that they are revealed only when the soul reaches the necessary maturity? And that perhaps, just perhaps, that fateful moment has come right now. The magical essence of alchemy does not reveal itself through flashes or sensational epiphanies. It emerges in the shadows, in a subtle, barely perceptible malaise, in that vague feeling that something does not fit. As if existence held much more than ephemeral goals, monotonous cycles, and social masks. It is an internal call, an invitation that does not shout, but persists tenaciously. In the Dark Ages, that voice was heard by a small circle. Those who surrendered to it did not desire glory or dominion. They crossed dark thresholds, but not those of physical laboratories. They explored the depths of their own psyche. They were the alchemists, not the goldsmiths of legend, but taciturn wanderers. Men and women who sensed a truth unknown to most. Genuine metamorphosis is always introspective. For them, lead was not mere metal. It embodied a shapeless consciousness, pregnant with limits, and the task was clear: to transmute it into gold. Not the gold of sovereigns, but the gold of the spirit, that condition of lucidity, emancipation, and inner harmony. Aware that this process required the crucible, not only material flames, but the pyre of suffering, of tribulations, of vigils without light, the fire that incinerates the illusion, leaving only the incorruptible core. In that allegorical chalice flourished the authentic alchemist, not he who recites recipes, but he who is reborn from the ashes of his own self. If you too feel that reality transcends the visible, that life is a pilgrimage towards a higher wisdom, then add your like, because I know that you understand, I know that you vibrate in unison with this message, and that together we can awaken that inner fire that is just waiting to blaze. This video is dedicated to you, to those who do not stop at surfaces. Show me your presence with a like. Authentic alchemy has always been a spiritual path disguised as science. That's why it was hidden, rewritten in symbols, protected by metaphors. Not because it was dangerous, but because it can only be understood by those who have eyes to see and a heart ready to listen. And when that call touches you, something inside you shifts. The world out there remains the same, but the eyes become more alert. The heart begins to remember what it had forgotten. And even without fully understanding, the seeker is already on the move. Gold has always fascinated humanity, but what few understand is that since ancient times, it has never been just a metal. For the ancient sages, gold represented what is eternal, incorruptible and pure, something that does not deteriorate with time, does not rust, does not tarnish, does not lose value. A perfect symbol of what the human being can become when he awakens. In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs used gold not only as an ornament, but as a bridge between the physical and divine worlds. They believed that gold was the flesh of the gods, a sacred metal that carried within it the vibration of immortality. In their tombs, gold was not placed to display power. It was a spiritual seal, a vibrational shield, a symbol of passage to a higher plane of existence. It was a reminder that life does not end with death, but is simply transmuted. But what most people did not know was that this gold was not sought outside. The true world of alchemy is invisible to the eye and precious to the soul. The mystics of the Middle Ages knew this. They understood that the greatest of all transmutations was not to transform lead into physical gold, but to transform the lead of consciousness into light. Transforming the rigidity of the conditioned mind into inner flexibility, fear into presence, ignorance into wisdom, pain into strength. This unshining gold is not found in safes, banks, or mines. It dwells silently within the human being. It can be revealed only when the ego melts in the heat of life's trials, when one faces the inner mirror and has the courage to see all that has been hidden, denied, or forgotten. It is in this process that true alchemy is born, but there is a crucial detail. The human soul, like metals, goes through phases. The ancient alchemists spoke of nigredo, albedo and rubedo, stages of alchemical work. First, the darkness of confusion, chaos, and loss of meaning. Then the whitening of the mind, emotional purification. Finally, rubedo, the red of realization, of awakened spiritual gold. Each of these stages represents a symbolic death and rebirth. The alchemist's quest, then, was not driven by greed but by an inner calling, a yearning to reconnect with what had been lost, the bond with the essence. And that essence is indestructible, immutable, eternal, like true gold, the gold of consciousness, the gold of the spirit. Few understand this language, for while the world pursues physical gold, power, fame, and recognition, the true seeker turns inward and seeks something far more precious, the perfection of the soul, a perfection that does not exclude flaws but integrates them, a wisdom that does not reject pain but transforms it, a light that does not blind but reveals. And it was precisely in search of this invisible gold, this silent perfection of the soul, that the ancient masters turned their gaze to a place where the knowledge of the world seemed to have condensed into a single point: Alexandria. A true beacon of wisdom in ancient times, where philosophers, astronomers, mystics, mathematicians, and initiates of various cultures gathered. There, at the crossroads of Greek thought, Egyptian spirituality, and Eastern secrets, one of the most mysterious languages ever created was born: alchemy. Alexandria was not just a city, it was a portal, a sacred space where knowledge and spirit walked together. The Library of Alexandria, with its thousands of scrolls, was a mirror of the inner universe. Each book kept there was a spark of a greater truth, and many of them were protected by symbols and metaphors that only the initiated could decipher. For true knowledge has never been delivered directly. It is veiled, hidden in plain sight, and revealed only to those who have eyes to see. It was in this environment that Zosimos of Panopolis emerged, one of the first alchemists to record in almost enigmatic words the essence of all that alchemy represents. He spoke of a stone that is not a stone, of an object that everyone knows, but no one understands. Zosimos was not describing a simple chemical compound. He was speaking of a spiritual mystery, of something that can be reached only by those who have already begun the process of inner transmutation. The philosopher's stone, in his symbolic language, was the center of everything, the key to eternal life, the secret of total healing, the meeting point of opposites. But to understand it, it was necessary to grasp something deeper, that everything in the universe has a spiritual correspondence. What is above reflects what is below. What is inside manifests itself outside. There is no separation between the visible and the invisible. Alchemy was born to teach this. That is why it was never just a set of formulas nor a mechanical science. It was a way of seeing the world, a lens that united body and soul, matter and spirit, reason and intuition. A true alchemist did not mix metals to enrich himself. He mixed symbols, archetypes, elements of nature, and internal states of consciousness. Every substance had a soul, every reaction represented a stage of the human journey. And so, the esoteric tradition began to spread silently, protected, camouflaged under myths, works of art, sacred buildings. But its origin was there, on the banks of the Nile, under the sky of Alexandria, where human knowledge bowed before the mystery of existence. And it is precisely at this point in the journey, immersed in the echoes of the esoteric tradition born in Alexandria, that the seeker begins to encounter one of the greatest mysteries of alchemy, the philosopher's stone, not as a physical object to be discovered in some hidden corner of the world, but as a profound enigma that challenges the common gaze and reveals its true nature, only to those who have already begun the inner transformation. The stone has never been just a substance. Its name, wrapped in metaphors and paradoxes, is a symbolic key that points to something beyond matter. There is a stone that is not a stone, wrote Zosimos, an object that everyone knows, but that no one truly understands. A symbol that represents the point of union between what seems separate. body and spirit, light and shadow, pain and wisdom. This stone is in reality the totality of being. It is not created with reagents or heated in physical furnaces, but is born from integration. When a person stops fighting inside, when he stops rejecting parts of himself and begins to look courageously at his own shadow, something begins to change. The division disappears, consciousness expands, and in that moment what was once conflict becomes understanding, what was heavy becomes presence. The search for the stone is therefore the search for oneself, but for a complete, not idealized self, one that recognizes both the light and the darkness within oneself, that accepts one's imperfections without getting lost in them, that understands that one does not have to be perfect but whole. And to make it even clearer, I will share with you a short story that illustrates what we are learning. It is said that once a young man traveled to a village high in the mountains to find a sage who, according to legend, guarded the philosopher's stone. He climbed steep paths, braved cold and hunger, until he finally found a small stone house where the old master lived. Anxious, the young man asked, "Master, do you really have the philosopher's stone, the one that turns everything into gold? I have come from far away to see it." The old man looked at him in silence, picked up an old mirror that was on the table and handed it to him. "Here it is," he said simply. The young man was confused. "But this is just a mirror." The old man smiled and replied, "Yes, but if you have the courage to look deeply inside and not take your eyes off what you find, you will see that everything you need to transform is there. The stone is not a thing. It is the moment when you stop looking outside and begin to recognize the power of transformation within yourself." The boy, disappointed, left. But years later, after having gone through losses, falls, lessons, and silences, he remembered that meeting. He took a normal mirror, looked sincerely at his reflection, and in that moment, he understood the stone had always been there, but he had to get lost to find it. The code of symbols, understanding that the true stone is the one born from the union of all that we are. A new door opens before the seeker, and this door does not reveal itself through clear words or linear reasoning. It opens through a different language, ancient and profound, that speaks directly to the soul, the language of symbols. The ancient alchemists knew that certain knowledge could not be explained but only perceived. They knew that the logical mind, conditioned by categories and limits, was not able to access the highest mysteries. That is why they hid their secrets between the lines of the images, not out of fear but out of wisdom. They understood that a true symbol does not give ready answers. It provokes, disturbs, invites you to look inside. In old alchemical manuscripts, we find strange, sometimes disturbing figures. A being with the body of both a man and a woman, a green lion devouring the sun, a black crow perched on a tomb. These images seem absurd at first glance, but they are not there by chance. Each is a key, each represents a stage of the inner journey. The hermaphrodite, for example, represents the union of opposites within us, the masculine and the feminine, reason and intuition, strength and surrender. When these polarities stop competing and start collaborating, something new is born, the integrated being. The green lion is the raw energy of the inner nature, which must be tamed and understood before it becomes wisdom. The black crow represents symbolic death, the end of an old identity, the moment when something inside us must die so that the new can be born. These images are not just illustrations, they are mirrors of the psyche. They speak to the most ancient and intuitive part of us, where logic cannot reach. This is why two people can look at the same symbol and see different things, because the symbol responds to the inner state of those who contemplate it. It is a reflection of the individual process of those who encounter it. The alchemist who drew these images was not trying to teach a concept. He was offering an experience, an invitation, an immersion. Because when you contemplate a symbol with sincerity, without haste and without judgment, something begins to move inside. The symbol touches where words cannot reach. It ignites forgotten memories. awakens silent understandings, and brings to light parts of the soul that were dormant. This is why the ancients said that symbols are medicine. They heal because they reveal. They heal because they reorganize the inner chaos. Without telling you what to do, they simply show you. And in that silent showing, something aligns, something returns to the center. By immersing himself in the universe of symbols and understanding that each image is a bridge to the soul, the seeker begins to realize that the world around him also speaks the same language. And then he begins to look at places with new eyes. Old buildings no longer seem just constructions, but reveal themselves as open books written in stone, silent but alive. It is at this point that the path leads to the Gothic cathedrals, where alchemy was hidden in plain sight, visible only to those with eyes ready to see. The great cathedrals of the Middle Ages, such as Notre Dame, were not built simply to host religious celebrations. They were designed with precision, full of meaning and sacred geometry, created to convey wisdom through form, light, and shadow. Every stained glass window, every sculpture, every arch had a spiritual function. Nothing was there by chance. Beneath the visible cloak of Christianity, deeper layers were hidden. Among apostles and saints, strange figures appeared discreetly on facades and columns. A woman with a shield in which a salamander burned in flames, a man holding a vial as if he were in the middle of an experiment. Creatures that challenged traditional iconography and indicated another reality, which coexisted within the same structure, the alchemical reality. The salamander, for example, was considered a creature of fire, capable of surviving flames without being consumed. For the alchemists, it symbolized the spirit that passes through the heat of transformation without being destroyed. The vial in the hands of an unknown figure was not a decorative detail. It was the alchemical vessel, the container in which the soul is purified. It is also the human body, where internal transmutation occurs. These details were not innocently inserted. They are part of a secret language that survived in the midst of oppression, camouflaged under official sanctity. For there was a wisdom that could not be taught openly, a wisdom that was hidden not to be forgotten, but to be protected, guarded, waiting for the right moment when the right eyes would find it. Between the cross and the crucible, heresy, persecution, and enlightenment. And when the seeker realizes that the temple is also within himself, that the stone and the fire dwell in his very essence, he begins to understand why this knowledge had to be hidden. The truth, when released, always threatens the structures that feed on ignorance. Alchemy, with its symbolic language, its spiritual autonomy, and its promise of inner transformation, became a threat to the powers that controlled not only bodies, but also souls. In the Middle Ages, the Church dominated the narrative of the divine. Salvation was sold as something external, mediated by dogmas and hierarchies. Alchemy, on the other hand, said that the divine existed within every human being, that the path to God was not made of blind obedience but of courage, silence, and transformation. This could not be tolerated. Monks, hermits, and scholars, who immersed themselves in alchemical texts, were watched, denounced, and condemned. Roger Bacon, one of the most brilliant thinkers of the 13th century, was silenced. His experiments, which combined science, philosophy, and spirituality, challenged the narrow vision that the clergy wanted to preserve. Imprisoned for heresy, he spent his last years in confinement, accused of seeking too much knowledge. Others were less fortunate. Many died in the flames. But it is here that the paradox reveals itself most forcefully, because the fire that burns is also the fire that purifies. In the alchemical vision, fire has never been only destruction. It was the great agent of transmutation, the heat that separates truth from falsehood, the flame that dissolves illusion and reveals the gold within. The persecuted alchemists knew this. They knew that the path was risky, that seeking the truth meant giving up safety, that looking within required dying while still alive. Not a physical death, but the death of the mask, the death of the ego, the death of everything that binds the soul to the lie of the world. The cross and the crucible thus became symbols of the same process. The cross represented the pain of human existence, the trials, the judgments, the passage. The crucible, in turn, was the vessel of suffering that transforms, where the soul is placed, heated, tested, and finally purified. The true alchemist accepted this fate not out of a desire for martyrdom, but from the awareness that his research was sacred. Because more than transforming metals, he sought to free himself. And there is no liberation without courage. There is no revelation without passing through fire. And it is precisely in this scenario, where the fire of judgment mixes with the fire of revelation, that figures emerge who seem to walk through time with a different light in their eyes. Alchemists who not only survived the flames, but left traces of something that many would call impossible. Among them, two names resonate with mysterious force: Nicolas Flamel and Paracelsus. Flamel, the silent scribe of Paris, lived a seemingly ordinary life. He copied manuscripts, lived discreetly, but kept a secret. For decades, he immersed himself in Hermetic texts, trying to decipher symbols that seemed impenetrable, until, according to ancient testimonies, he found the way to the great work. In the year 1382, he is said to have transmuted mercury into gold, not just a material accomplishment, but a sign of a completed spiritual transformation. What makes the story even more intriguing is not the accounts of wealth, but what he did with that gold. Instead of flaunting it, Flamel and his wife began funding hospitals, churches, and shelters. They were not seeking power, they were seeking to serve. Their gold became bread, healing, and shelter. And then, mysteriously, they disappeared. Centuries later, there were still those who claimed to have seen them, without signs of aging, with a different light in their eyes, as if the stone had done more than transform metals, as if it had freed the soul from time. While Flamel walked the edge of light, Paracelsus ventured into the most dangerous realms of shadow. Physician, philosopher, and rebel, Paracelsus challenged not only the medicine of his time, but also nature itself. He claimed that the secrets of life could be revealed, that creation was not the exclusive domain of the gods, and that man, if he achieved full understanding of matter and spirit, could generate life. This is how the homunculus emerged, a creature artificially created in a laboratory, according to him, through a complex alchemical process involving human elements, hidden forces, and symbolic manipulations of life energy. But what shocked people was not only the idea of generating life outside the human womb, it was the fact that this life would not have a soul, the return of the eternal and the stone within. And when the world seemed to have left behind the echoes of alchemy, when the furnaces had cooled, and the symbols were hidden under the dust of oblivion, something amazing happened. In the silence of a mind that would forever change the history of science, the hidden flame of the great work still burned. Isaac Newton, the man who explained gravity, who created calculus, who revealed invisible laws that govern the universe, held a secret that few dared to explore. For years, alongside his scientific discoveries, Newton immersed himself in alchemical manuscripts. He copied ancient formulas, translated Hermetic symbols, and wrote over 1,000,000 words on transmutation, spiritual essence, and the philosopher's stone. His laboratory was not only a space of reason, it was also the realm of the invisible. But there is a price to pay when you cross borders without a map. Newton began to show strange signs: an emotional breakdown, confusing letters, unfounded accusations, insomnia, delusions. Many believe that he was poisoned by the mercury he used in his experiments, but perhaps the poisoning was also symbolic. Perhaps it was the burden of trying to unite two conflicting worlds, the rational and the mystical, science and the soul, the visible and the invisible. This fragmentation reveals something profound. When the mind touches the mystery without preparation, without integration, it can get lost, because it is not just about knowledge, it is about being ready. Alchemy, like any true spiritual path, requires more than intellect. It requires presence, balance, an open heart. And when this is missing, even the greatest genius can find himself facing the abyss. But the gold that Newton sought was not lost. It simply remained dormant for a few more centuries, until, in another time and in a different language, it was rediscovered. And this happened not in a laboratory, but on the therapy couch. Not in formulas, but in dreams. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest names in modern psychology, began to notice something strange in his patients' reports. Strange symbols, archetypal images, patterns that did not seem to come from personal experiences. And in investigating these contents, Jung came across ancient alchemical treatises. He realized that these images were not fantasies, they were expressions of the anima, manifestations of the unconscious. For Jung, the philosopher's stone was not a substance. It was the symbol of psychic totality, the self, the deepest and most integrated part of being, the one that brings together light and shadow, reason and emotion, instinct and spirit. And the alchemical journey was nothing but a symbolic map of individuation, the process of becoming whole. He understood that the alchemist's laboratory was a reflection of the inner world, that each mixed element represented an aspect of the psyche. The transmutation was not only metallic but psychological, healing emotional wounds, recognizing unconscious patterns, integrating denied parts. All this was living alchemy. What the ancients codified in symbols, Jung transposed into the lexicon of the modern psyche. Yet the essence remained unchanged. The authentic work is not done externally but internally. Gold lies not in mines but in enlightened consciousness. And the philosopher's stone manifests only when the seeker abandons the hunt to embrace the vision. Ultimately, every path leads back to the origin. The hunt for gold, for knowledge, for the sacred has always been a journey towards the core of the self. And when this understanding blossoms, the barriers between alchemy, mysticism, and the science of the soul dissolve. Everything converges in the one eternal blossoming of awareness. Before I leave you, allow me one last revelation. If these words have vibrated in your depths, if you have perceived an echo of your inner truth, join this dialogue with a like. Share your intuition in the comments and become part of the community by subscribing to the channel. Here, in this space of ours, we will navigate together the depths and peaks of authentic existence. My gratitude for walking this stretch of path with me. I'll wait for you beyond the next bend because the dawn of inner transformation is only the first step. A greeting full of light, and don't forget, every revolution begins from the mirror of your soul. See you soon.